And it's 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, depending
Yeah.
on where you are.
I think we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Holistic Vet Sisters. So just the three of us, three of us absolutely here every week for you to answer the questions. We're going to have some more Holistic Vet Sisters coming up in the next few weeks as well. I think Tina's got the calendar and she can let us know who's going to be with us in the next few weeks. But for this week, it is myself and Dr. Lise Hansen and Dr. Tina Hansen. They're not related, just before you ask. Yeah, we tend to get asked that question every week. We get asked a question every week about TETA tests, don't we? We said this is like the TETA Titer show. So we're going to talk about those again for you because we've been asked. And also, I believe, Tina, we've got some other questions, haven't we?
Yeah, so there was one question from Berta. She wanted to know more about Addison's disease. She didn't mention any details, but I think just in general what Addison's is and how, like, if there's a holistic view to it, causes, stuff like that.
I mean, Addison's is quite rare. I'm assuming it's a dog with Addison's. I'm not sure I've ever seen Addison's in a cat. But Addison's is also called hypoadrenocorticism. So it's an underfunction of the adrenal glands, which are two tiny little glands next to the kidneys. That's why they're called adrenal glands, the glands next to the kidneys. And they produce cortisol, among other things. And when they underproduce, then you end up with a lack of two hormones, cortisol and aldosterone, which is to my understanding, not having read up on this, I think it's mostly a hereditary problem, like some sort of autoimmune, or you're born with the tendency, is my understanding, to develop Addison's disease, and it's rare. And it's one of those diseases where it can be hard to make the diagnosis because it's kind of unspecific. There'll be maybe weight loss, maybe lack of appetite, maybe just someone who's not thriving, and you kind of have to test quite widely. It doesn't have one specific symptom that means, this is Addison's, which means they're often patients that have been kind of through the mill a little bit, trying to look for why are they not right? Why are they not strong? And once you get the diagnosis, it's a little bit like type 1 diabetes. That is one of those diseases where there's a lack. So you need to give them what they haven't got. Like a diabetic dog doesn't have insulin, and there is no way around giving them insulin. There is no alternative treatment to that. You can support them in other ways through diet and supplements and holistic treatments, but you can't not supply them with the thing that they're lacking. And Addison's is the same. You need to give them the hormones that they're lacking, and you have to give them for the rest of their life. There is no other treatment than that. That's not to say that you can't support the animal as well, and you can't boost the treatment and help them, but there isn't an alternative to giving them what they haven't got. I've only seen Addison's a handful of times. It's not a very common problem. I talk about Addison's almost every day, but that's because of another type of Addison's, because Addison's means a lack of cortisol, or a lack of steroid, a lack of the steroids that are made in the adrenal glands. And so its relevance much more commonly is if animals have been on steroid treatment, like prednisolone, or any kind of steroid that we often give to, well, there's an old joke, which is a bit rude, saying that there are three veterinary treatments. There's antibiotics, there's steroids, and there's antibiotics and steroids. And thankfully it's not always like that, but a lot of steroids are prescribed to treat animals. And I treat a lot of allergic dogs and cats, and a lot of them are on steroids when they come to me. And a lot of them come because they can't tolerate the steroids anymore. So either the vet is suggesting some very potent medication or other very expensive medication or other medication that for whatever reason they don't want to go on and they can't tolerate steroids anymore. So they're looking at euthanasia, etc. So a lot of the patients that come to me are on steroids. So when they get homeopathic treatment and they start to get better, we have to wean them off steroids. And that's where the awareness of Addison's become important, because if someone has been on steroids for more than a few weeks, and these dogs have sometimes been on steroids for months, a few of them even for a couple of years before they can't tolerate it anymore. And if you then just stop steroids, then they can develop Addison's just from that reason. And the mechanism behind that is that the normal regulation of the adrenal gland and the steroid production is in one of those. I mean, the body is just amazing with these feedback systems where, the brain regulates all these hormones. And we're all producing steroids all the time in very small dosages, this endogenous steroid production in our adrenal glands. But if you then give a dog prednisolone, for instance, because it's itching or whatever, and you give very high dosages compared to our normal physiological levels, it means that the brain keeps telling the adrenal glands, stop, 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 stop. There's way too much steroid in this body. Stop producing, stop producing. So if we're giving steroid as a treatment, the adrenal glands just shut down. And if you've been doing that for months or even years, and then you cure the problem that the steroids were given for, the allergy, they've now had homeopathic treatment, the allergy is cured, they don't need steroids anymore. And if you then just stop, you can actually induce what we call iatrogenic disease, disease that doesn't come from the body, but is caused by our use of medicines, that you induce Addison's, because the brain has shut down the adrenal gland. The adrenal glands are closed for business. They haven't been needed forever. And suddenly you stop giving it in pill form or from the outside. And then there's just an acute shortage. And that is a form of Addison's disease, which happens if your dog has been on a long steroid course and you just stop. And that's the reason why when we give steroids, we carefully wean off, and we end up with giving every other day treatment for a while, so that the adrenal glands kind of get a chance to get sort of nudged back into production while we still supplement them a little bit. So that's a more common or a reason to be aware of Addison's, in a way, in that when you mess with the cortisone levels and the steroid levels, you have to withdraw the treatment carefully so that the adrenal glands can get back up and you don't get acute induced Addison's that way. But Addison's that has nothing to do with steroid treatment, but just comes from a problem with the adrenal glands, I think is primarily a hereditary condition, which is also reflected in the fact that some breeds get it more commonly than others. It could also be tumors or other unusual reasons for it. But that was probably what I got to say about Addison's. Beard is welcome to write if there was a specific angle that she was looking for and didn't get. But it's mostly something that figures in my daily practice in terms of weaning patients off steroids. You have to be aware that you can't just stop, because then you might induce Addison's. Addison's is a primary problem I haven't seen in several years, actually. It's quite a relatively rare disease.
I missed the last things you said there.
Yeah,
but,
it was so clever.
Yeah, last week in this place with terrible Wi-Fi. Yeah, no, the only thing I think I would add, obviously depends on the reason for Addison as well. If there was some kind of infection or something that affected the adrenal glands, so they're kind of destroyed, and we don't know if they're gonna start functioning properly again. But a lot of the times, like you said, it can be autoimmune. So I think in that sense, you would kind of support them in a similar way, like you would, holistically decrease inflammation, try to limit inflammation from every direction that you can, and then the rest depends on the individual dog. Usually, I haven't seen any cats either, and the symptoms and their constitution, and take it from there.
Yeah, there's lots you can do to support the individual, but I think it's a disease where you should expect lifelong treatment. A bit like with the type 1 diabetic, this is going to be lifelong treatment. But the flip side of that is that once you have the diagnosis and the treatment is started and, the treatment levels are right, the dog should be fine. but it will require lifelong treatment.
Mm. Personally, I think it's quite interesting with endocrinology as well, because I think there's still so much we don't know. Like these hormones are obviously chemical messengers, but I think there's still a lot of elements in the body that we don't even know what they do. You know, if you have Hashimoto's, for example, where your antibodies are attacking your thyroid, which is kind of similar in a way with autoimmune diseases, that, you know, we treat it with thyroid T4, usually sometimes with T3. But the thyroid do a lot of other things than just producing thyroid hormone. And the only thing we supplement is kind of that one thing. And if you go in all these groups and people talk about their symptoms and, I'm on medication, but I still have these symptoms. So obviously, I think we have a long way to go still when it comes to endocrinology and even knowing the reasons behind all the chemical messengers in our body.
Yeah, so. and we always get into trouble when we get arrogant enough to think that we can just, you know, we can just mess with it because we think we understand it, or maybe even that we can improve it, and then things go wrong because we don't, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. If anyone have any questions, by the way, feel free to ask them in the comments. We have some free space today. If anyone has any burning questions.
I'd say as well, I mean, it may go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that a dog that has this kind of diagnosis, or even a dog that's coming off steroids slowly, and you want to avoid this, reducing stress levels has got to be part of it as well, a huge part of it. So helping the dog to be a vessel that can deal and be resilient to things that are happening within their life has got to be part of it, you know, balancing their emotions.
Absolutely. As with any disease, really, isn't it? I mean, it's always the case. You could say Addison's is kind of the opposite of Cushing's, isn't it? It's underproduction of the adrenal gland, where Cushing's is overproduction of the adrenal gland, and you get Cushing's disease can happen as an endogenous disease the way Addison's can, but it can also happen from, which again is more common, from prolonged treatment with steroids. You can get a Cushing's disease, which is caused by medications. Which, yeah, I mean, if you treat an allergic dog with steroids for long enough, it'll get Cushing's disease for sure. They all do.
So should we talk again about titer testing? I think there was another question about titer test. And I can't remember exact question, but I think it was about why when we do, because there's a difference between in-house titer testing and the ones you send out to the lab. And she was asking why there's a difference, that sometimes you can test it in-house and it tells you that you need to vaccinate, but if you send it out of the clinic to an external lab, sometimes it comes, you don't have to vaccinate.
I saw that question, and it sort of suggested that someone had found that when you treat in-house, you get more negative results than if you send it to a lab. And that is just not my experience. I don't agree with that. Well, that's not my observation, except, and this becomes very specific and maybe not very helpful, but in years gone by, I've done a lot of talks to dog groups, etc., about titer testing. And then what they will typically do is get together and go to their local vet and say, we know we are 50 people and we would like titer tests, so please start offering these in-house titer tests. And then if the vet gets the kit home and maybe thinks, I don't need to study the manual, I can wing it, it looks fairly simple and logical, I'll just kind of, you know, just assume that they can intuitively interpret the titer talk result. There is an inbuilt opportunity to do that wrong, that it's slightly illogical, because if the most common test kit, which is from BioGal, which is called VaxiCheck, and which is the one most vets use, if you do the test, there's a control. I mean, this is maybe unnecessary information, but there's a control that you use to calibrate. It's you're judging, you're assessing a color change in your sample, and there's a control color that you use to calibrate your scale. And if you think, I see how this works, and you compare the test to the control and assume, which kind of appears logical, that anything that's darker than the control is a positive and anything that's lighter than the control is a negative, then you're going to get a lot of negatives, because it's not made that way. The control equals a score of 3, and in fact 2 is a positive test. It's debatable whether 1 is positive, but just to be on the safe side, it's been decided that 0 and 1 should lead to a recommendation of vaccination, and 2 and above means the dog should not be vaccinated. But 2 is a very, very common score. So if the vet does the test all the way to the end result, which means assigning a number between 0 and 6 for each of the 3 diseases that you're testing for, you'll not get a lot of negative results. But if the vet thinks, anything that's lighter than the control must be a negative, then you're going to get a lot of false negatives. But that's just because of the test not being interpreted correctly. And I find that can happen. So if I get an email from someone saying, we went to your talk and now we've all had titer tests and, half of them were negative, I will say, I think you should go back to your vet and ask what your numbers were. And if the vet says numbers, what numbers? I don't understand what she means by numbers. Then they haven't completed the test properly. They've just compared everyone to the control. So this is definitely too much information because obviously the owner is not doing the test or is not having to interpret the test. But I would, if someone experiences, if as a group, which is kind of what I read from the question, is we had this done in-house and there were a lot of negatives, I would just test that the vet has actually read it correctly. And the way to test that in a polite and discreet way is to say, could I just have the number for each of the 3 diseases for my animal, please? And Biogel I have actually discussed this with the company, and they are aware that there is this risk of just, if you jump to conclusions, you're not going to read them properly. And they made a quick guide that sort of quickly makes it very clear at one glance, and that's included in the newer test kits, that just quickly makes it obvious that you want a number between 0 and 6, and if it's 0 or 1, you vaccinate. If it's 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, you don't. But all of that just adds up to the fact that it is absolutely not my experience that an in-house test done correctly and interpreted correctly leads to more negatives at all. But that's one situation where it could be falsely interpreted. I absolutely recommend the in-house tests. I think they are easier to interpret. They are much cheaper. And I think that's the way to go. And also, I think vets that get the in-house kit just deserve the recognition for that. I think it's a really nice litmus test that just shows you there's a good vet. I had this conversation with someone today who had been unfortunately treated by their vet, and we just talked about, how do you find a good vet? How do you know that a vet is a good vet? And I think it's a bit like when I take my car to the mechanic. I don't know. I can't assess their work. I don't know whether they're competent at what they're doing. I can see if they're friendly, but I don't mean, for most people, it's just, you can't assess their medical competence. You can assess their manner with you and with your dog, but how do you know that they're good vets? And I think one way is that if they're offering in-house titer testing, then at least they're following the science and they're well informed. So I think it's a nice test that it's a good vet as for an owner to use. And I think vets that offer that deserve to be, they deserve your business, and you're going to get better treatment probably all around from those vets. So I really think in-house titer testing for lots of different reasons is the way to go. And it's not my experience that they give more negative results. That was a very long answer.
That was pretty much what Victoria said as well in the comments.
All right, there you are. Probably in a much fewer words.
No, but we need the long explanation. I think it's good.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, where we typically see the negative titer test results are the young dogs who've only had their puppy jabs, and then they're somewhere between a couple of months old and 16 months old, where they'd often go back for a booster. And if they've only had the puppy jabs, then there are quite a few negative titer tests because they never responded to their puppy vaccines because they were given too young. And that's where the negative titer tests really happen. Once adult dogs have been vaccinated, they're very rare. Yeah.
But we did actually have another question in the chat here about mushrooms. So the question from Lynn, she's asking about mushroom supplements. Can you discuss why? Can it be used as support or preventative?
Why? Why can they be used, or why should, or
probably why should you give them? maybe?
Yeah, can you discuss why, or can it be used as
Well,
support, preventative? Question mark.
so medicinal mushrooms, they're fairly new, really, on the supplement market in terms of trends. And so medicine, it's funny actually, because one of my students today let me know that she's going to write her dissertation, her final assessment on mushrooms. And I reminded her that it isn't just about the medicinal claims or the potential medicinal support they could offer, but also they can offer nutrients as well, and they can be really good prebiotics. And that really benefits the microbiome. Often prebiotics are way better than probiotics. So certain types of mushrooms have certain prebiotic abilities as well. So that alone is a reason to use them within the diet, because remember that they are still a food. So they are still part of, they're not a nutraceutical as such. They are actually still a whole food when you're adding these. They are also often very high in vitamin D, sometimes in a good way, because dogs can be deficient in vitamin D quite easily. It depends on the type of diet, obviously, that you're feeding. And it depends how they're dried. If they're dried upside down and the gills are looking at the sun, they will create vitamin D within them, just like our skin does. So you can also use them to boost vitamin D. And actually, it's probably even worth going with a really quality brand that would understand that as well, and understand the potential that you're going to be adding more vitamin D into your dog's bowl when you give these mushrooms. So a lot of them don't know. If I've actually used mushrooms in formulated recipes for pet food companies before, and they don't know the vitamin D content. So if you just ask them, do you know how they were dried? And if they do know that, and they weren't in the sun and they weren't upside down, so their gills were showing, their chances are they're not going to be too high in vitamin D. So you can ask questions like that to find a bit more out about the processing of these mushrooms. Now, another one of my students runs Mutt Shrooms, which I think is a fantastic name, Mutt Shrooms with a double T, and Jess and Ellis, and they know an awful lot about these. So they've studied them for a very long time before coming up with the supplements that they have. There's various different mushrooms, and usually they are combined within supplements, and that's okay to do that. But if you do just want to use the properties of one, then it's okay to give one as well. And they have molecules or compounds that have been shown in quite a lot of studies, actually, to act in certain ways on the cells and on the body, and balancing the endocrine system, actually, funnily enough. Although interestingly, throughout the time of me learning about mushrooms, I've only ever heard one guy say that he wasn't particularly keen on them. But it was a guy that I really, really do like and admire in terms of his work. And he is someone who's been in the probiotic supplement world for a very long time, decades. And he was saying that he feels that you can use them for too long, and that actually they should be used for the need that they should be used for, the need that they can provide within the body. And that actually just to continuously use these things is putting a strain on the kidneys. So that's something worth thinking about. Yes, they are a food. Yes, they are a whole food, but they do have these adaptogenic properties about them within the endocrine system. So should we really be using them every day just as a throw-on supplement with our dogs? I don't think so. I think we need to think about using them, and they do have amazing properties. They do have really useful and rightly so labeled medicinal qualities about them, but we do just need to be a little bit careful about just using them long term. Really look at the ones that you're thinking of using, and choose them specifically for your dog, and use them for a reason, or a nutrient reason, like the vitamin D content, rather than just sort of throwing them on. But I definitely would get involved. I'd learn more about them. The mycelium as well, there's a wonderful book. It's Sheldrake. It's the son of Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who wrote that. That know when they're coming
beautiful
home.
Book, yeah.
Merlin Sheldrake, I think, isn't it? Yeah, that's worth looking into, because they are a network, really. They're part of a network, so they have that energetic quality about them as well, in terms of communication. So I believe that they're putting through an energy, or that's helping the body to communicate cellularly as well, which is always a good thing. We can always do with that, especially all the different technology and Wi-Fi that's dampening down our communication energetically. So yeah, I mean, learn more about them. They're definitely a use them, but within reason, you know.
I absolutely agree with that, and I think there is a like you, I think you said the word, they're new as a trend, and there is definitely an element of trendiness about all these supplements, and sometimes there's just this very vague idea that something is good, and this is good, so we'll just give it, and this is good, so we'll just give that as well. And I like the fact that the question started with kind of why, because I think that that's a really relevant question. I don't think it's necessarily a good idea, well, for ourselves or animals, just to be, filling ourselves with supplements sort of uncritically. I think you need to have an aim and a reason, and not necessarily give something for prolonged periods of time. Lots of supplements that we use, it's better to give a course of something or a burst of something and then give the body a rest from it, as a sort of general approach. Rather than sort of, and there is, I mean, when you're in practice, you do see this a lot. There's one year when everyone comes in and they're on turmeric for no particular reason, and the next year they're all on CBD oil, and the next year they're all on coconut oil, and and you just think, oh, okay, it's
Yeah.
it can be sort of very unspecific and very trendy, and I think it's nice to ask why. What is it I'm trying to achieve, and then how do I best achieve that, and did it work? To be a little bit. So I think it's a good question.
Yeah,
I
think that's a
agree.
very good question, and I think it's important to talk about as well. So like, because a lot of people ask like, my dog is fed raw or my dog is fed fresh. Do they need supplements? And it all depends, right? And I don't think necessarily everyone needs to throw on supplements for everything. It's really, you really need to look at everything that they're eating. You can even like test it with a hair mineral analysis, things like this. So for me with mushrooms, I mean, yes, like Caroline said, you can, add some like, but either medicinal or prebiotic mushrooms to the diet once in a while, just for like a health benefit. But I use them very much more like kind of medicine or for specific cases. So I usually, if there's, for example, some types of cancer or some other types of cancer, for example, if you have an older dog with dementia or nervous system problems, then there are, some mushrooms that are really good with these. And like you said, sometimes they come in blends, or you can blend them yourself depending on kind of what you need and what your dog even likes and what they want to eat, and how picky they are. So yeah, I think it's definitely important to look at kind of the individual. What do this individual need? Because no, not necessarily every dog should be on mushroom, or not necessarily every dog can benefit from this one mushroom. It's really more, it's even like with like herbs and supplements and preventative things, you can have one client who comes and says, this worked perfectly for me, but then you have another one who's the exact same thing in the almost similar dog, but it didn't work, So I think it's very specific, and it should be very tailored to that one individual.
Yeah. And like Caroline was saying, it's a food. I went on a course in medicinal mushrooms a couple of years ago, and what I really liked about it, I can't remember the name of the teacher, but he was very kind of practical, and he said, look, just think of it as it's a food, and it's really healthy, and that goes for a lot of the benefits from mushrooms are across the field, and if you take it as a food, he was saying, just go, the mushrooms on the pizza, they're good for you as well. Just normal button mushrooms are healthy, and you should just eat more mushrooms. And I think that's a good point. I'll remember that again now. But I went home and cooked mushrooms every other day after that, and then I kind of forgot again. But there are some health benefits. But that's not to say that everybody should be on a concentrated mushroom supplement for long periods of time at all, really.
You know what
I'm
waiting for? Oh, go on, Tina, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say it really comes from like all foods. I think really variation is so important, because also what we see when we look at I've started doing a bit of hair mineral analysis, and one of the things we see is that typically if they have like a base thing that is maybe not super species specific, that they can suddenly get high levels of, for example, copper, and then that kind of whacks off all the other nutrients in the body, and then they get a real imbalance, and then that can lead to other things down the line. So everything with like feeding lots of one thing I think it's just variation is really key if you want to like avoid deficiencies because the body can adapt to so much, you know, like we are us and dogs, we're really designed to, okay, so we don't have this vitamin or mineral, so we use our storage, you know, we can the body works that way because it balances out itself. But then if you always keep eating, I don't know, the same thing or you're lacking a lot of things, then over time you will get issues. So really the body takes what it needs from what you eat there and then it can store things and it can, you know, excrete more or less depending on what the body needs as well. So it really, I think a variety is just so underrated.
And this kind of goes back to what we were saying before about not having the arrogance to think that we necessarily understand the exact needs of everything. You know, make it available, and the body will take what it needs and excrete what it doesn't need.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Absolutely. What I was going to say, I'm waiting.
Sorry, yes.
Trend. I'm waiting. No, I'm waiting for the trend of homeopathy. I want this again. Do you know the amount of times I see on groups people asking questions, what supplement should I use? And I think, no, homeopathy would nail this. Why do we not talk about homeopathy? It's so untrendy and I don't get it because it's so
Oh no,
amazing.
it's not untrendy. I mean, it's certainly the homeopathic vets are finding that it's an odd situation at the moment, particularly in the UK, in that there is such a demand and we can't. It's just
Really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I mean, there
We
isn't
need more.
the most of the homeopathic vets I know are saying I can't take on new patients, and we really need more vets qualified in
don't think
homeopathy. The demand is overwhelming. But no, I agree with your point though. I mean, I was driving home from work today before we were starting here and thinking, God, I wish people knew, you know, what you see in a day. Like, I mean, I had a 17-year-old cat today with kidney failure that has been on homeopathy for 6 weeks and just had a repeat blood test. And I mean, creatinine has just completely gone back to I mean, it's just like, this isn't possible. What, you know, and that's my experience I mean, not just on a daily basis, but many times during a day that you think that can't happen. I just saw it again. You know, this is incurable. The dog is healthy. It's unbelievable what goes on, and most people don't know. Yeah, but I mean, I agree with you. I can't. Some of these groups where people discuss the disease, and I'm thinking, for heaven's sake, you know, this clearly needs homeopathy. It is.
You know what
Yeah.
I think I should come to Lisa and I should film what she does in a day and we'll make a
That's
YouTube
the
show out of it
deal.
and we can
Yeah.
show it.
It's been my ambition for decades that I should take pictures, before and after pictures. Also because I treat a lot of allergic skin disease, so it's very easy to photograph. You know, this is what they look like. And when you're in the middle of it and you've got an hour and it's a busy day and you're focusing and it's just like, that's another one where I didn't take a before picture. But yeah, come and we'll make a film.
I think it'll be cool.
Yeah.
A little YouTube series.
Yeah. No, but it really deserves to be shown, you know, what happens. I mean, just today, I mean, a 17-year-old cat that's where the kidney function is normalizing on just homeopathy, not supposed to be able to happen. I had a dog with well, kind of undiagnosed. It was very tired, lethargic, huffing and puffing, unwell, wouldn't eat, on off. And it had MRI scans, it had every blood test under the sun. And in the end, they thought maybe it's hormonal, then they neutered it, then it got worse. And then they were talking about euthanasia and treated it homeopathically, absolutely fine within days. Just, you know, 2 years of, I don't know how many, you know, I mean, the cost of testing this dog for everything and everything coming up with nothing, and on less than a week of homeopathy is fine. And that's just, you know, I mean, it's very hard. Sometimes it's hard to see all this. And I mean, I've talked about this before, and I've written about this on shared quite a lot on Facebook recently, because I saw this film introducing homeopathy that just really somehow released that in me that I hadn't even been aware of, that I see all this stuff every day, and that yet a lot of, you know, the world kind of pretends, like Caroline was saying, the world sort of ignores what homeopathy can do. And it can be hard to see it all the time and not stand like a crazy person on a soapbox on the street corner and shout about it. But yeah, it is. Everybody should have homeopathy. That's all I can say. Don't give up unless you've tried homeopathy, whatever it is.
That's got, apart from the teeter test, that's got to be, hasn't it? Don't give up without homeopathy.
That's my new catchphrase.
I've seen this with so many dogs. Dogs that I've really, really helped with skin issues, with diet and the like. And then the guardians sort of given a wormer and everything's come back. And then after that, nothing we do seems to change. 2 doses of a homeopathic remedy, they're okay. It's like, wow, it's like this layer of energy, whatever the frequency was in the body, needed to be cleared. The homeopathy worked with it, and the dog's healthy again. It is amazing, and it is something. I mean, I'd like to think that I do have an understanding of what's happening in the body, but many people don't. And I think it would be really good to do some kind of course, or maybe it's something you could offer in the future.
But there is, I mean, I had a guardian recently where they came, it was a couple that brought their dog, and this particular dog had been on steroids for, I think, 3 or 4 years, longer than most dogs can stay on steroids. But it also had severe Cushing's disease from all the steroids, and now it was going to be euthanized. They tried other treatments and it wasn't responding, so it had come down to steroids. And the vet says from the start, this is going to be a shorter life, but we'll keep this. And that, I don't know, somehow that sounds like an acceptable bargain, but it had been on steroids and now it couldn't tolerate steroids anymore and it was going to be euthanized. And then, so my point is, this is a dog that had been ill for at least 4 or 5 years, most of its life. And we treated it with homeopathy and it got absolutely better. Within 2 or 3 months, it was well, and we had weaned it off steroids. And the owner, it's interesting how people respond in that situation. And he got really, really angry. And I can just, it sort of impressed me, this, big man just kind of saying, where can I go and shout about this? Because I'm upset. I was told for years that there is no cure. The best you can do is give these pills. And I saw my dog nearly die from the treatment, and now it's cured within a couple of months. And where can I complain that no one told me this? And I can understand the frustration.
Yeah.
And I often hear people say, just as a sort of aside, my old dog was euthanized because of allergy or something, and I'm thinking, no dog should ever be euthanized because of allergies. Allergies are not incurable, as everyone's always told. They're just incurable within one system of medicine. They're not incurable per se. You just need to use different tools. And it's tragic when that doesn't happen.
So, Lise, is there an answer to that? Where could people go? I mean, can they write to the VMD? Can they write to the UKRVS? Or what? Like, what would happen?
I mean, we're here, aren't we? And I mean, I've written my books partly as a response to that. This is what happens. This is what, and allergies is what I often talk about, because allergies is partly a very common condition, but also a condition that is never cured by conventional medicine. It is incurable in the conventional system. But if you use other tools, if you use homeopathy or acupuncture, you can balance the immune system and you can cure this. But yet, I mean, the vets aren't lying. A vet that sees a dog with allergies and says this can't be cured, you need to stay on this medication for life, they're absolutely telling the truth to the best of their knowledge with the tools that they know how to use. But it is tragic that they're not aware that there are other systems, and they are increasingly, I find, and owners are increasingly, but yeah, it can be frustrating sometimes. But I mean, we write books, we talk here, I try to shout about it, but yeah, I mean, anybody, I can only encourage anybody with a chronically ill animal, anybody who's incurable through conventional medicine, and not just animals, of course, people as well. If it's not getting cured, if you keep seeing the doctor with the same problem, or if you keep taking your animal to the vet with the same problem, it's obviously a problem that's not curable with conventional medicine. Conventional medicine is fantastic for life-saving, I mean, life-threatening infections, or there's lots of life-threatening acute disease, and there's lots of surgery that is absolutely amazing. But the diseases that end up being chronic diseases that end up needing repeated or ongoing treatment are obviously the ones that aren't curable within that system of medicine. And that's really the time to look elsewhere, and not necessarily to try to home treat or to try to ask random people on the internet, but find a professional who knows what they're doing, and get proper treatment. That would be my advice to anybody. Yes, that was my rant for the day.
Cool. Let's talk about the root canal question.
Hey, Caroline, didn't you have something you wanted to talk about your behavior?
Yeah, I
concept?
don't mind. I mean, it kind of goes. I mean, it kind of goes in with what we're talking about with energy, really. Which we can come back to it though, because I do feel bad that we haven't answered this lady's question about the root canal.
Ask the root canal question and we'll answer it in 2 seconds,
Oh.
whatever it is.
Okay. Yeah, so there was a question from Sophia on Instagram. She asked, what is your opinion on root canals on a cat who lost one of their canine teeth? Is it always necessary? I don't want to put my kitty into a surgery that maybe it wasn't too necessary.
Oh, Tina's breaking up a bit, isn't she?
We probably need more information about the case. I mean, if the whole tooth is gone, then I can't imagine root canal being relevant. So it must maybe be a damaged tooth or a cracked tooth or something like that. And I think the main issue is to make sure that the cat is not in pain. Like if there's an exposed root, that could be painful and that would need treating. But if the whole tooth has gone, then that wouldn't be an issue. So I think it depends on the situation. If she doesn't want root canal, or if she thinks that sounds a bit over the top, which I can sympathize with really, then it could just be a matter of getting the vet to extract the tooth. If it's not a cosmetic concern.
Maybe Sophia could write something more that she would like to know about this. Maybe it was just, should she do it? Or is there an actual alternative, which really there isn't as such?
No.
Yeah.
If there's a damaged tooth and an exposed root and the vet has recommended root canal, then I would guess that the choice is between doing that or having the tooth extracted, which in many situations would be my recommendation.
Long term, can't we? We can think long term about how to support the cat's gums in the future or the cat's mouth and periodontal support in the future. But it may be, I mean, maybe we just need to know a little bit more information.
Yeah.
It
sounds more traumatic to me, but obviously we don't know.
Yeah, I remember that Dr. Richard Alport used to really like coenzyme Q10 for the gums. That's in his cat book, actually, with relevant doses. Now that book's difficult to get hold of.
Is it?
I'm very lucky to have one. Yeah, don't see them really now.
Richard Alport has just retired, like literally last month or something, after a very long and important. Yeah, absolutely.
Great guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully that answers that. Is Tina still with us?
Yeah, Tina's back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think you just had bad Wi-Fi for a moment there.
You were going to say something, Caroline, about...
Well, yeah, because if we haven't got any more questions, we wondered whether we would just talk about our favourite things. And of course, Lisa's already nabbed her time about homeopathy, although to be honest, it is one of my favourites as well. So yeah, Tina, it's down to Tina and me. I wanted to just mention, especially after last week as well, because we spoke quite a bit about behaviour, didn't we, last week? We ended up speaking about behaviour last week. Now, obviously, with this, I'm on my phone now. So when I was on my laptop in the last few lives, we had Caroline Canine Flow written. And Canine Flow is, as well as the nutrition work that I do with dogs, Canine Flow is another branch of work that I do with dogs. Or I don't know that I would really even call it work because it's so amazing. I love doing it. It doesn't feel like work. So essentially, I run retreats for people and their dogs, and I've done that for 15 years. And in a short period of running these retreats, it became very aware to me that the dogs' behaviours were changing a lot, and that was continuing at home. And so I I wanted to understand what I was doing, what things were different in terms of how was it that simple things like heart-based work, or what seemed like a simple thing, and the meditative work we were doing, meditating with our dogs, how would that have this effect on dogs? And so I've gone down over the last sort of 12 years or so, quite a long rabbit hole, a warren really, in terms of what's happening energetically with our dogs. And I've come to the conclusion that the vital life force flow that we talk about in so many therapies, so it could be acupuncture, it's called the chi, as Tina well knows, and I don't know what you would call it in homeopathy other than vital life force flow.
Vital force, yeah.
Yeah, vital force. To me, this is the fundamental moving, flowing, evolving, shaping energy of us, and it is very, very, very linked in to our emotions, because for me, emotion means energy in motion. So emotions are something that should be flowing and moving and shaping, and we should at all times have the opportunity to allow those emotions to do what I call ground. So to come from the body, flowing, have a vital life force flow that flows, and to ground those emotions. Now, some emotions we know we would ground very quickly. We might punch out, for instance, or we might clap, or we might hug someone because we're overcome with a feeling, and that turns into the behavior of wanting to hug somebody. So this vital life force flow for me is a huge part of what shapes a dog's choice of behavior, and it isn't even something that reaches the mind. So this flow is literally flowing from them, looking to be grounded, a little bit like electricity wants to ground. It just wants to flow and ground, flow and ground, flow and ground. And dogs do this all the time, and they're grounding all the time with their mouth. So the excited dog, when you come home from work, very often isn't just coming all around you. He's wiggling because of the emotion he's feeling in his body and this vital life force that's come alive in him because you're there. And you are a being that he wants to ground onto. He wants to give you his emotion. So he's wiggling and moving, but then he will go and get a toy because that allows that grounding action. This is the limbic system. This is where emotions are. So that grounding happens for him. And often then when they've ground on that toy or whatever it is they've put in their mouth, could even sometimes be your shoe that you've just taken off, for instance, that they will then stop wiggling as much and calm. So they calm because the energy isn't trying to move out of them. So I have kind of developed this system that I call canine flow, because it's about the flow of energy and the vital life force flow. And I kind of call it like the other half of dog training. But what I have found by utilizing it and teaching people how to see the vital life force flow and see when the dog is trying to ground and not stop that, I've found that we can shape behaviors, completely transform behaviors, and we don't need any of the other training. Now, it doesn't mean that the other training isn't ever useful, because obviously we don't live in the kind of world where you can just leave your dog free running all the time. If only, some of them would love that. But things like even aggression is such a flow ground exercise for the dog. There is no thought process behind that, and neither should we give them a thought process. We shouldn't get them to stop and think, should I bite that other dog's bottom? It's like, no, let's look at what's happening emotionally for the dog and what's happening about that grounding. Because a lot of the dogs I work with, they don't have grounding opportunities. Even when canine enrichment is offered to them, that it's not always done in a way that they can really ground their emotion. And then second to that, a lot of dogs don't have the vessel, don't have the body to have that resilience to any emotions that are coming up in them. So they might need to ground more than we actually think the average dog would need to ground their emotions. So they get it stuck in them. And then, of course, that can manifest in ailments as well, as I'm sure you two both know. You see enough of these ailments. And sometimes that's rooted in stuck energy in the body. And when the dog is given an opportunity to ground that emotion out of them, usually they will do it with their mouth, sometimes their paws. The ailments change as well. I've had loads of people that I've worked with where there's been a crossover between the nutrition and the behavior, because I have said to these people, okay, so what else is going on for the dog? And say, for instance, I had a Brachy breed dog that I was working with that had terrible allergies, and we'd really helped with diet and reducing drug use and chemicals around the home, all the kind of stuff we do anyway. And they said, well, I've been doing what you said, and I've been letting him sniff more, and that's the only difference this week, and things have really reduced, because the dog was just so full of energy that he just needed to ground and get out, and sniffing allows them to do that. And often with Brachy breeds, because they literally do have less opportunity to point and focus that energy out of them, they can get very full of energy. So when we massage around this area, we start to release that for them as well, and around their ears as well, which is an old T-touch trick as well that I learned a long time ago, but I now understand more about why it's helping, because it's allowing this energy to flow through their system. So yeah, essentially, I guess what it is that I feel a little bit like I do with the homeopathy, that I see so many dogs that are either reactive to other dogs, or reactive only on the lead is a classic for flow. That's a classic, because the dog is so full of energy, needs to ground, and is trying to do that. And off the lead, at least they get a little bit of a chance to do it, but on the lead, no, they don't. They can only do what the guardian guides them to do, and very often that's stopping them sniffing, getting them out the way, you know. So there's so many behaviors that I see, and I think, yes, training would support this dog, and very often it helps them with the management of what's going on. But the frequency behind the behavior, that energy in motion, is so important. And not the last retreat I did, but the one before, I had a really great guy came to talk about homeopathy, who happens to live near, Lise probably knows him, near the retreat centre. And I sat there and I was like, goodness me, this just ties in so much, because essentially what he was talking about is how he transforms canine behaviour using homeopathy. So you're essentially changing the frequency of the dog, which is what I'm doing with the canine flow as well. Do you know? And anyway, so it made me even more excited, because I thought, wow, here we have this understanding that when the dog is behaving, when we're seeing an action or a choice of behavior, it's nothing to do with the mind. We have to get out of believing that the mind and the intellect are this all-encompassing, amazing thing. They're wonderful, but really the heart is so important with that. The heart has been shown to, they've measured emotions away from the heart, 3 foot away from the heart, different emotions, and each one had a different numerical value. Each one had a different frequency. Like a sound wave would be measured as a set of numbers, it's a frequency. So were these emotions. And consistently for the same emotion, no matter the person, they measured the same frequency, the same set of numbers. So we know that emotions have this frequency, and yet we're not necessarily utilizing that in our understanding. So we keep going back to the mind. And yet if we really truly believe in vital life force flow, which all acupuncturists do, there is no reason for us not to believe that vital life force flow is playing a huge role in behavioral choices. So we do not need to outwit the dog. We do not need to understand what's going on in their mind. It doesn't matter about neuropathways. None of that matters. It's about changing the frequency. And I think as well that this is why zoopharma works really well for behaviors, because the plant has an energy that the dog is drawn to ground on. They ground, that unifying energy. The energies meet and ground each other. So the behavior will shift. Of course it will, because the energy that was there, the flow, has been grounded. So yeah, anyway, that's my rant.
That's brilliant. And I think it's funny you also talk about
Peter Gregory.
Yeah,
of course.
Honored to have him.
Well, of course. Yes.
Anyway, go on, Tina, what were you going to say?
I don't know if you can hear me. That's why I'm like,
yeah, no, we can.
Oh, I just wanted to add, with Chinese medicine, they've been knowing this for years. When we talk about the behavioral issues, we usually talk about a Shen disturbance, a disturbance of the mind. And in very many situations, this is usually comes back to a problem with the heart element. So I just think it's funny that you also
Ah.
are talking about it in more Western
It is
research.
so not the mind, is it? The heart is such, and the dog has the biggest heart per body mass of any creature.
Mhm.
So they're like a walking magnetic field that's
And in fact,
trying
we
to.
all are. I mean, we all are.
But
Plants
they
are
have
as
a
well.
bigger
Yeah.
field. They have a stronger magnetic field because of their heart per body mass. We have a smaller heart per body mass. So yes, we have a magnetic field. But I think of it as if dogs are like magnets towards something. So they're magnetically drawn. There's no thought process. It's just it's a magnetic drawing to ground. So when you've got two dogs that see each other in the street, they're magnets. They're magnets. You can't be like, oh no, we do obviously stop them meeting. A lot of people do, but they are actually magnets, which they're so strong magnets wanting to get to each other. It's whereas we're not so much like that as people. We don't see another person and feel this kind of like we do if we really love them and we want to go and see them, but we don't. Do you know what I mean? We don't have that constant. Whereas most dogs, it doesn't matter what dog it is, they appears in front of them, comes around the corner, there's a magnetic pull.
And I
And
love
I
that. I
think,
love that. I love that how dog training, used to be, if you go back 20 years, it was all about making the dog obey or making the dog behave in the way we wanted the dog to behave. Whereas today it's much more like you describe about understanding, why are they doing that? What's going on for them? What's my role in that? And how can I, facilitate something that works? It's so much more interesting when you look at it that way.
it's more
mm,
compassionate for sure.
Mm,
Is for sure. But I still feel that there's this element of seeing the dog as an energy being is a little bit lost. It's not
mm.
completely in the framework. And I find when I add that in, that's when the shifts change completely for people. And when they
I
learn to see the flow and see the flow coming out or see what their dog is doing when they feel that they're ungrounded, get to know what their ungrounded dog's behaviors are. Go on, Tina.
Yeah, and it's I think physics is like the biggest thing missing from medicine. And I've been looking at this from afar for so long now. And it's like in med school and in vet school, we learn so much about biochemistry and how different particles, work on each other. But when you look at it like into a very small aspect, you see all these particles. We are literally flying particles, there are space between everything. Like we cannot see it, but there are space between every molecule, and within every, the cells are built of different elements, and there's space between them, and it's just all that space is energy. That's what keeps everything together. And I feel like Western medicine's just completely, they don't look at energy at all. And it's just, I feel that's really what is missing. And that's also why I'm so drawn to like acupuncture, because it's all about energy and connecting the dots of the things that not always chemistry can do something about. Something is sometimes it's physics, sometimes it's energy. And yeah.
that is such a clever. I mean, that's such a good point. It's such a brilliant point. And
Mm.
the film introducing homeopathy makes that point as well. That what we think of as modern medicine or conventional medicine is totally chemistry, and it is so last millennium, really, isn't it? I mean, the future is physics. Space
I like that. I
exploration
like
is
that.
physics. Understanding, that's where the big discoveries are made these days. And acupuncture is physics, and homeopathy is physics. But this whole sort of milligram per, it's chemistry. It's where we were in the 19th century. It's modern medicine is physics. It's a very, very good point. Yeah. And what Caroline's talking about is energy and physics and electromagnetism. Yeah,
So we're
Yeah.
absolutely.
really we're just harder on the physics side of things.
Yeah. We're the future.
Ish.
Some of us more than others, but anyway.
We're the future.
We are the future. You heard it here first. Yeah. And we are out of time. That was an hour in good company as always. We will be back
Yeah,
Next
who
week
have
with
we
an
got?
American. We got
Tina,
Dr. Marlene Siegel with us next week.
oh, can't wait.
She's from America, and she does, she has a full functioning integrator practice. And she has so many modalities and so many interesting tools within her hospital that I'm very excited to hear more about.
So we need
Fantastic.
questions for next week.
And we have some questions. There are some questions that we haven't had time to answer today as well, but
goodness, sorry.
no, that's okay. Oh, we'll never get to the bottom of the list of questions, I don't think. But keep them coming. And if you've asked us a question and we haven't answered it, write it again, because we do lose the sort of track of them if they wait too long. But we got lots of questions, and we'll get back to them next week. I keep forgetting that I'm the one who has to end this, so I'll just sit here and wait for Caroline to do it.
See you next week, everybody.
Yes.